Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. This is my story, one I never thought I'd share, but maybe someone out there needs to hear it. What happened to me changed everything I believed in about love, trust, and betrayal. So here it goes. It started with a sound. Not a cry, not a whimper from my daughter's crib, but a whisper. A hushed tone slipping through the baby monitor speaker on my nightstand. A sound so alien in the context of a nursery that it jolted me awake faster than any alarm clock ever could. You think you know the sounds of your home, especially the sacred space of your child's room. The soft sighs, the rustle of blankets, maybe the gentle hum of a white noise machine. You don't expect to hear your wife's voice, low and intimate, tangled with the deeper murmur of another man. Not there. Not with our 6-month-old daughter sleeping just feet away. That night, the innocuous device meant to bring peace of mind became the conduit for the complete annihilation of my world. The betrayal wasn't just that she was cheating. It was the audacity, the sheer recklessness of bringing him into our home, into the room adjacent to our baby, using the quiet hum of the monitor meant to protect our child as a shield for their deceit. It felt like a violation layered upon violation, a desecration of everything I held dear. Before that night, I thought we had it all, or at least, we were building it. Sarah and I met in college, a whirlwind romance that felt destined, scripted. She was vibrant, ambitious, the kind of person who lit up a room. I was steadier, quieter, happy to be the anchor to her kite. We balanced each other, or so I believed. We dated for 5 years, married for 3. The wedding was perfect, a sun-drenched day filled with laughter and promises whispered under an old oak tree. We bought a modest house in a decent neighborhood, poured our savings and sweat into making it a home. Then came Lily, our daughter. Her arrival was the culmination of everything we'd worked towards, the tiny, perfect centerpiece of our life. Motherhood transformed Sarah, softening some edges, sharpening others. She was fiercely protective, endlessly loving towards Lily, and watching her with our daughter often filled me with a profound sense of rightness, of peace. Sure, things got harder. Sleepless nights, the constant demands of an infant, the strain on our finances and our time. We argued more, usually about stupid things, chores, who was more tired, whose turn it was to deal with the diaper explosion. Standard new parent stuff, I figured. Stressed as that. We'd find our rhythm again. I threw myself into work, trying to be the provider, picking up extra hours to ease the financial pressure, maybe mistakenly thinking that was the best way to support my family. I realize now, looking back, that while I was focused on building the walls of our life, the foundation was crumbling beneath my feet. There were signs, I guess. Little things. Her phone became surgically attached to her hand, always angled away from me. She started having more girls' nights or needing to run errands alone, often late in the evening after Lily was asleep. There were vague explanations, slight inconsistencies in her stories that pricked at the edge of my awareness, but I dismissed them. Trust is a powerful blinder. You don't want to see what you don't want to believe. Who wants to suspect the person they share their bed with, the mother of their child? You tell yourself it's the stress, the hormones, the adjustment. You make excuses because the alternative is unthinkable. Her mother, Carol, was always a presence in our lives, sometimes supportive, often critical. She adored Sarah, saw her as perfection personified, and viewed me with a certain skepticism as perhaps not quite good enough for her daughter. She'd offer unsolicited advice, drop passive-aggressive comments about my job or how I helped around the house. I tolerated it for Sarah's sake, maintaining a polite, if sometimes strained, relationship. Little did I know how central she would become to the nightmare unfolding, how eagerly she would leap to defend the indefensible and attempt to rewrite the narrative, casting me not as the victim, but as the villain. That night, the whisper on the monitor wasn't just a sound. It was the starting gun for the race to the bottom, the signal that the life I knew was already over. I just hadn't realized it yet. The silence that followed that initial whisper was deafening, filled only by the frantic pounding of my own heart. Lying there in the darkness, frozen, I strained to hear more, desperately hoping I'd imagined it. That it was the radio from a passing car or some interference. My hand hovered over the monitor's base unit, knuckles white. Should I turn up the volume? Should I pretend I hadn't heard? Every instinct screamed at me to shut it off, to sink back into blissful ignorance. But a colder, harder part of me needed to know. I needed the truth, no matter how ugly. Slowly, meticulously, I increased the volume, notch by painful notch. The faint static grew louder, punctuated by Lily's soft breathing, a rhythmic counterpoint to the chaos erupting in my chest. And then, clear as day, I heard it again. Her voice, Sarah's voice, laced with a breathless intimacy I hadn't heard directed at me in months. "Shoo, you'll wake her," she whispered, followed by a low chuckle that wasn't hers. It was him, a man's voice, deep and unfamiliar. "She's out cold," he replied, his tone smug, confident. "Besides, we're being quiet." Quiet? They were in the guest room, the room directly adjacent to Lily's nursery, sharing a wall. The baby monitor, designed to pick up even the faintest sounds from the crib, was inadvertently broadcasting their clandestine encounter directly to our bedroom. The irony was sickening. A tool for parental vigilance, now a witness to marital betrayal. My breath hitched. My stomach churned. This wasn't just a flirtatious phone call or inappropriate texts. This was physical. He was here, in our house, while I was asleep down the hall, while our daughter slept meters away. The sounds that followed confirmed my worst fears. Soft sighs, muffled movements, the rhythmic creak of the guest room bed, a bed I had assembled myself. Each sound was a hammer blow, shattering the image of my wife, my marriage, my life. I couldn't process it. My mind raced, trying to make sense of the senseless. Who was he? How long had this been going on? How could she do this here? The disrespect wasn't just towards me. It was towards our child, our home, the sanctity of our family. I felt a surge of white-hot rage, an almost primal urge to storm down the hall, to throw open that door and confront them, to unleash the hurricane of pain and fury building inside me. But something held me back. Maybe it was the thought of Lily waking up to shouting, to violence. Maybe it was a shred of self-preservation, the knowledge that acting on pure rage rarely leads anywhere good. Or maybe, deep down, I needed more. I needed undeniable proof, something she couldn't wriggle out of with tears or excuses. My hand, shaking uncontrollably, reached for my phone. With trembling fingers, I opened the audio recording app. I held the phone's microphone close to the baby monitor speaker, capturing the sickening soundtrack of my life falling apart. Minutes stretched into an eternity. I recorded everything. The whispers, the sighs, their eventual, quiet exit from the room, the soft click of the guest room door closing, followed by the even softer click of our front door. Then silence, save for Lily's gentle breaths and the frantic drumming in my ears. I lay there for what felt like hours, the recording looping in my mind even after the monitor fell silent. The betrayal felt total, absolute. It wasn't just sex, it was the calculated deception, the violation of our shared space, the endangerment, however indirectly, of our child's peace. How could she have looked me in the eye earlier that evening? We'd eaten dinner together, talked about our days, bathed Lily, read her a story. It was all a lie, a performance. I felt like a fool, naive and blind. The trust one had placed in her, the very bedrock of our relationship, had been pulverized. When the first hints of dawn began to streak the sky, I heard the faint sound of her key in the lock. She was back, slipping in as if returning from a late-night store run. I didn't move. I feigned sleep, my body rigid, my mind a whirlwind. She crept into the bedroom, undressed in the dim light, and slid into bed beside me, careful not to touch me. The scent of unfamiliar cologne clung faintly to her, a ghost in the space between us. Lying there, inches from her, yet worlds away, I knew nothing would ever be the same. The monitor sat silently on the nightstand, its purpose fulfilled in the most devastating way imaginable. It had shown me the truth, stark and brutal. The question now was, what the hell was I going to do about it? The morning after felt surreal, shrouded in a thick fog of disbelief and a pain so sharp it was physical. Every nerve ending screamed. Making breakfast, the clatter of plates sounded unnaturally loud, the smell of coffee nauseating. Sarah came downstairs, yawning, dressed in her usual weekend sweats, acting as if nothing had happened. She cooed at Lily in her high chair, complaining about how poorly she'd slept, maybe a touch of a headache. The normalcy of it was jarring, grotesque. How could she compartmentalize like that? How could she switch from clandestine lover to doting mother and unassuming wife with such ease? It made my skin crawl. I wanted to scream, to smash plates, to demand answers. But I held back, the audio recording burning a hole in my pocket, a silent promise of confrontation on my terms. I needed to think, to plan. My mind was a chaotic mess, but one thing was clear. I couldn't pretend. I couldn't live like this. The charade had to end. I waited until Lily was down for her morning nap. The house fell quiet, the tension thickening the air between us. Sarah was scrolling through her phone on the couch, oblivious. I walked over, stood in front of her, and simply said her name. The way I said it, low and dead, must have conveyed something because she looked up, a flicker of apprehension in her eyes. "We need to talk," I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the tremor inside. I didn't wait for a response. I pulled out my phone, opened the recording app, and pressed play. I didn't play the most explicit parts, just enough. The whispers, his voice, her unmistakable giggle, the creak of the bed. I held the phone out, letting the sounds fill the space between us. Her face went slack, then drained of all color. Her eyes darted from the phone to my face, wide with panic and disbelief. She opened her mouth, then closed it, speechless. The silence stretched, heavy and accusatory. "The baby monitor," I stated flatly. "Guest room. Last night, while I was sleeping down the hall and our daughter was sleeping next door. The dam broke." Tears welled instantly, spilling down her cheeks. "Mark, I can explain," she stammered, her voice trembling. But the explanation, when it came, was a torrent of justifications, deflections, and blame. It wasn't what I thought. It only happened a few times. She was lonely. I worked too much. I wasn't present enough. She felt neglected, unseen. She never meant to hurt me. Each excuse felt like another stab wound. There was no remorse for the act itself, only regret at being caught. And then came the ultimate betrayal. It was just sex, Mark. It didn't mean anything. "You're blowing this out of proportion." Blowing it out of proportion? Bringing another man into our home, into the room next to our baby? The disrespect was staggering. The argument escalated quickly, voices rising despite my initial attempt at calm. Tears turned to anger on her part. How dare I invade her privacy? How dare I record her? Suddenly, I was the bad guy. It was textbook deflection. Just as things reached a fever pitch, her phone rang. Caller ID. Mom. Of course. Sarah snatched it up, sobbing hysterically into the receiver. "Mom, you need to come over." "Mark, he recorded me. He's accusing me." Within 20 minutes, Carol was at our door, bursting in like a stormtrooper ready for battle, her face a mask of righteous fury. She bypassed me completely, rushing to Sarah's side, enveloping her in a protective hug while glaring daggers at me. "What is going on here?" she demanded, her voice sharp. "What have you done to my daughter?" Sarah, emboldened by her mother's presence, launched into a tearful, heavily edited version of events, painting herself as the victim of my supposed paranoia and controlling behavior, vaguely alluding to feeling unhappy but omitting the crucial detail of the affair partner being in our house. And then Carol turned on me, her eyes blazing. "I knew it," she hissed. "I always knew you weren't right for her. You're always working, never paying attention to her needs. No wonder she's unhappy. A woman has needs, Mark. Maybe if you were a better husband, she wouldn't be looking for comfort elsewhere." My jaw dropped. She was blaming me? blaming me for my wife bringing another man into our home while our baby slept nearby. The sheer audacity, the twisted logic, was breathtaking. Comfort elsewhere? I repeated, my voice dangerously low. Carol, are you hearing yourself? She wasn't seeking comfort. She had another man in the guest room last night. I heard them on the baby monitor. Carol scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. Oh, please. You probably misunderstood. Maybe it was the TV. It wasn't the TV, Carol, I said, holding up my phone. I have the recording. Her eyes narrowed, but a flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. Sarah sobbed louder. He's trying to twist everything, Mom. He's trying to make me look bad because he feels guilty for neglecting me. Carol immediately latched onto that. Exactly. This is what men like you do. You mess up, you drive your wife away, and then you try to blame her to make yourself feel better. You should be ashamed. The injustice of it was suffocating. They were tag-teaming me, mother and daughter, united in their delusion and desperate attempt to shift the blame. They were trying to gaslight me, to make me question my own sanity, my own ears. In that moment, any lingering flicker of hope for reconciliation, any thought of therapy or working through this, evaporated. It wasn't just Sarah's betrayal anymore. It was this insidious campaign, spearheaded by her mother, to rewrite reality and paint me as the villain in my own tragedy. The lines were drawn. It was me against them. And I had the proof. The pain was still immense, a gaping wound in my chest, but beneath it, a cold, hard resolve began to form. They wanted a war? They'd get one. But I wouldn't fight dirty like them. I would fight with the truth. The days following the confrontation were a blur of raw emotion and logistical nightmares. The house felt simultaneously too big and suffocatingly small. Every object held a memory, now tainted. Sarah and I existed in separate orbits, communicating only when absolutely necessary, usually about Lily, our interactions clipped and cold. The tension was unbearable. Carol, predictably, became a near-constant presence, ostensibly there to support Sarah, but mostly acting as her enforcer and my personal tormentor. She'd sweep in, ignore me pointedly, make passive-aggressive remarks within earshot about men who don't appreciate what they have, and generally make my own home feel like hostile territory. Sarah, meanwhile, alternated between tearful apologies, always tinged with justification, and sullen silence. She made no move to leave, nor did she offer any concrete plan for how we could possibly move forward. It seemed she expected me to just get over it, perhaps after a suitable period of groveling on her part, facilitated by her mother's guilt trips. But the image of her with another man, the sound of their voices on the monitor, Carol's vicious attack, these things weren't compartmentalizable. They were fractures in the foundation, irreparable damage. I couldn't unhear what I'd heard, couldn't unsee the betrayal in my mind's eye. Living under the same roof became intolerable. One evening, after another whispered phone call Sarah tried to hide and another snide comment from Carol about my parenting, I snapped. Not violently, but decisively. This isn't working, I told Sarah, keeping my voice level despite the storm inside. One of us needs to leave. And since you're the one who violated this home, it should be you. Predictably, Carol exploded. How dare you kick your wife and child out onto the street? She shrieked. Lily needs her mother. You're being selfish and cruel. Lily also needs a stable environment, not one filled with tension and resentment, I countered. And I'm not kicking Lily out. Sarah can go stay with you, Carol. You seem eager to support her. Sarah looked stunned, then defiant. I'm not going anywhere. This is my home too. It stopped being our home when you brought someone else into it, I replied, the words tasting like ash. It became clear she wouldn't leave willingly, and forcing the issue would only traumatize Lily. I realized, with a sinking heart, that I would have to be the one to go, at least temporarily. The unfairness stung, being driven from my own home because of her actions, but I needed space. I needed to think clearly, away from the toxic atmosphere they had created. I packed a bag, my hands shaking with a mixture of anger and grief. Kissing Lily goodbye felt like ripping my own heart out. I found a cheap motel room, sterile and impersonal, a stark contrast to the home I lovingly curated. The silence was deafening, broken only by the thoughts racing through my head. What now? Divorce felt inevitable, a terrifying prospect involving lawyers, custody battles, and the final dismantling of the life I thought I had. The pain was immense, but beneath it, the resolve I'd felt during the confrontation with Carol hardened. They weren't just going to walk away from this unscathed, leaving me broken and blamed. Sarah had betrayed me, and Carol had tried to gaslight me into accepting responsibility for it. They underestimated me. I wasn't going to roll over. My mind started working, formulating a plan. Not for petty revenge in the traditional sense. Slashing tires or anonymous notes weren't my style. My revenge would be the truth, delivered strategically and undeniably. I had the audio recording, the ace up my sleeve. First step, lawyer up. I spent hours researching family law attorneys, looking for someone sharp, experienced in high-conflict divorces, someone who wouldn't be intimidated. I found one, scheduled a consultation, and laid everything out: the affair, the discovery via baby monitor, the recording, Carol's interference, Sarah's refusal to leave the house. The lawyer listened patiently, his expression grim but professional. The audio recording, he confirmed, was likely admissible, especially given the circumstances, recording sounds emanating from a common area/child's monitor, not a private conversation where privacy was expected. It was powerful evidence of infidelity and poor judgment, particularly relevant regarding custody discussions. Second step, secure my finances. I meticulously gathered financial documents, bank statements, pay stubs, investment records, mortgage details. I opened a new bank account in my name only and started diverting my paycheck there. I needed to protect myself and ensure I had the resources for the legal battle ahead and for supporting Lily. Third step, information control. Carol and Sarah were already spinning their narrative to family and friends, painting me as neglectful, possibly unstable. I needed to counteract that, but carefully. I wouldn't engage in mudslinging, but I wouldn't let their lies stand unchallenged either. My plan centered on a single, decisive move: revealing the truth, backed by evidence, at a moment when it would have the maximum impact and dismantle their narrative completely. The target wasn't just Sarah, it was Carol's smug self-righteousness and her attempt to blame me. She wanted to protect her daughter's image at my expense? Fine. Let's see how that image held up against cold, hard proof. The motel room felt less like a prison and more like a war room. The grief was still there, a constant ache, but now it was overlaid with a grim determination. They had underestimated my pain, my resolve, and my intelligence. They thought I would crumble. They were wrong. I was preparing for battle, armed with the truth and the quiet fury of a man betrayed. The days bled into weeks. I settled into a painful routine: work, gym, mostly hitting the heavy bag, calls with my lawyer, researching divorce procedures, and precious, gut-wrenching video calls with Lily, facilitated reluctantly by Sarah. Seeing my daughter's face on the screen, hearing her babble, was both the highlight and the lowest point of my day. It fueled my resolve but also underscored the immense loss. Sarah, under Carol's influence, remained firmly entrenched in the house and in her narrative of victimhood. According to mutual friends who awkwardly reached out, the story being circulated was that I had become emotionally distant and controlling, culminating in me kicking her out, conveniently omitting that I was the one who actually left. After misinterpreting some sounds on the baby monitor due to stress, Carol was apparently playing the role of the concerned mother hen, rallying support for poor, misunderstood Sarah. The audacity was breathtaking. They were counting on my silence, my shame, perhaps even my lingering love for Sarah, to keep the real story buried. They miscalculated. My lawyer and I worked on the divorce petition. We documented everything meticulously: the timeline of the affair discovery, the details heard on the monitor, Sarah's admissions during the confrontation, Carol's subsequent behavior, and my reasons for leaving the marital home. The audio recording was logged as key evidence. The plan wasn't just about the legal proceedings. It was about reclaiming the narrative they had tried so desperately to steal from me. The opportunity presented itself sooner than expected. Carol, in her infinite wisdom, decided to throw Sarah a support gathering, essentially a pity party disguised as a girls' night, inviting several of their mutual friends and some extended family members. It was meant to solidify Sarah's victim status and garner sympathy. A friend, caught in the middle and uncomfortable with the lies she was hearing, tipped me off about the gathering, expressing her own disbelief at Sarah and Carol's version of events. This was it. The perfect moment. Not to crash the party physically, that would be dramatic and counterproductive, but to ensure the truth arrived as an uninvited guest. I spent hours debating the best approach. Sending the audio file directly felt too aggressive, too much like lashing out. I needed something more controlled, something undeniable that forced a confrontation with reality. I decided to focus on Carol. She was the architect of the smear campaign, the one actively gaslighting everyone, including possibly Sarah herself. She needed to be confronted directly, but publicly. I selected a few key, undeniable snippets from the audio recording, not the most graphic, but enough to clearly capture Sarah's voice, the man's voice, and the intimate nature of their conversation, unequivocally placing them together in the house. I also prepared screenshots of text messages I'd found on our shared tablet from weeks prior, messages between Sarah and the affair partner discussing previous meetups and confirming plans for the night in question. Then, I composed an email. The recipients were Carol, Sarah, and, crucially, Carol's sister, Aunt Patty, who was known in the family for her no-nonsense attitude and her intolerance for deceit. I knew Patty would be at the support gathering. The email was brief, factual, and devoid of angry rhetoric. Subject: the truth about last month. Body: Carol, Sarah, Patty. I understand there's a gathering tonight based on a false narrative about why I left the family home. I have tolerated the lies and accusations long enough. Before more damage is done by spreading misinformation, I feel it's crucial for everyone, especially family, to understand the actual events. Attached are audio clips recorded via the baby monitor from the guest room on the night of date, confirming Sarah was entertaining a male guest while I and our daughter were asleep in the house. Also attached are screenshots confirming this was pre-planned. Carol, your attempts to blame me for your daughter's actions are unacceptable and deeply damaging. Sarah, your choices have consequences. I am proceeding with divorce based on these facts. I hope, for Lily's sake, we can handle the rest of this with more honesty than has been shown so far. Mark. I attached the audio snippets in the screenshot files. My finger hovered over the send button, my heart pounding. This felt like crossing the Rubicon. There was no going back. I took a deep breath and clicked send. I timed it perfectly, sending it just as the gathering was likely getting underway at my former home. Then, I turned off my phone. I didn't want to know the immediate fallout. I went for a long drive, the silence of the car a stark contrast to the storm I knew I had just unleashed. There was no satisfaction, only a hollow ache. This wasn't a victory. It was a necessary, painful step towards liberation from their lies. The revenge, if you could call it that, wasn't about causing pain, but about exposing the truth they had tried so hard to bury. It was about defending my reputation and ensuring the foundation of our divorce was built on reality, not their carefully constructed fiction. Carol wanted to play savior and manipulator? Fine. Let her explain that audio recording to Aunt Patty and the others. Let Sarah face the real consequences of her actions, stripped bare of her mother's protective shield of deceit. The ball was in their court now, but I had changed the game entirely. The aftermath of the email wasn't explosive in the way I might have half expected. No immediate angry calls or texts, mainly because my phone remained off for several hours. When I finally turned it back on, there was a predictable flurry of missed calls and venomous texts from Carol, filled with accusations, threats, and denials that now rang utterly hollow. There was also a message from Sarah, surprisingly subdued, simply saying, "We need to talk," without my mom. But the most telling communication came from Aunt Patty. It was a short, direct email. "Mark, I received your email and listened to the files. I am horrified and deeply disappointed. Carol and Sarah owe you an apology, though I doubt you'll get a sincere one. Let me know if there's anything reasonable I can do to help facilitate things, especially regarding Lily." That email was confirmation. The truth bomb had landed exactly where intended. Patty's validation was quiet vindication. The carefully crafted narrative Carol had built crumbled under the weight of undeniable proof. Friends who had been fed the false story started reaching out cautiously, offering tentative support, their tone shifting from pitying Sarah to being appalled by her actions and Carol's complicity. The support gathering had apparently imploded the moment Patty, after receiving the email, excused herself to listen to the audio clips in her car, returned white-faced, and confronted both Carol and Sarah in front of everyone. Witnesses described Carol attempting to bluster and deny, but the evidence was too stark. Sarah broke down completely. The guests left awkwardly. The pity party transformed into a wake for Sarah's reputation and Carol's credibility. The power dynamic shifted instantly. Sarah agreed to move out, taking a room at Carol's house temporarily. The atmosphere in my former home changed overnight when I returned to collect more of my things and arrange for Lily's care schedule. The oppressive tension was gone, replaced by a somber quiet. Sarah avoided eye contact, her face pale and drawn. Carol was nowhere to be seen. Our conversation about the divorce was brief and businesslike, a stark contrast to the emotional, blame-filled arguments of before. With the truth out, her leverage was gone. She knew I had irrefutable grounds, and her mother's attempts to paint me as the villain had backfired spectacularly. We agreed, through lawyers, to mediation rather than a drawn-out court battle. The audio recording and screenshots ensured the infidelity clause was non-negotiable, impacting the division of assets slightly in my favor, though my primary focus was always Lily. We worked out a custody agreement that prioritized Lily's stability, with me eventually moving back into the family home after a thorough cleansing and rearranging, and Sarah having generous visitation. It wasn't perfect, but it was functional, centered on our daughter's well-being, which was the only thing that truly mattered. Dealing with the affair partner was something I consciously chose not to pursue directly. Exposing him publicly or confronting him felt like wasted energy. His identity became known during the fallout. A coworker of Sarah's, also married. The consequences within Sarah's social and familial circle were punishment enough, and I trusted karma, or his own wife, would handle the rest. My focus needed to be on healing and rebuilding my life with Lily. The justice wasn't about destroying Sarah or Carol. It was about reclaiming my truth and ensuring a fair outcome. It was about refusing to be the scapegoat for their actions. Carol, humbled and furious, largely retreated, her relationship with Sarah reportedly strained. She'd lost face within the family and her attempts to manipulate the situation had failed miserably. She still occasionally tried to interfere, especially regarding Lily, but Aunt Patty and other family members now viewed her actions through a lens of skepticism, limiting her influence. The divorce was finalized relatively quickly, given the circumstances. Signing the papers felt less like an ending and more like closing a painful, poisonous chapter. There was no sense of triumph, just a profound sadness for the family that could have been, for the trust that was shattered, and for the innocence lost. But there was also a sense of relief, of release. The weight of the lies, the betrayal, the gaslighting, it was lifted. I could finally breathe again, albeit into lungs scarred by the experience. The baby monitor, ironically, remained in Lily's room, but now it broadcast only the familiar, comforting sounds of my daughter sleeping peacefully in her own home, safe and sound. Its unintended role in uncovering the darkness was over. Now, it was back to being just a tool for peace of mind, a symbol, perhaps, that even instruments of betrayal can eventually return to their intended purpose, just as lives can be rebuilt, piece by painful piece. Looking back now, a couple of years down the line, the raw wound has scarred over, but the mark remains. It's a constant reminder of the fragility of trust and the devastating impact of betrayal. The life I envisioned, the neat suburban dream with the white picket fence, evaporated that night I heard those whispers on the baby monitor. What replaced it is something different, harder edged, perhaps, but more real, forged in the crucible of loss and resilience. Rebuilding wasn't easy. There were days swallowed by grief, nights haunted by intrusive thoughts, moments where the anger flared up unexpectedly. Therapy helped immensely. Talking it through, processing the layers of betrayal, not just Sarah's infidelity, but her choice to do it in our home, and Carol's malicious attempt to blame me, was crucial. It allowed me to separate my own worth from the actions of others, to understand that her choices were about her failings, not mine. My relationship with Sarah is functional, strictly co-parenting focused. We communicate civilly for Lily's sake, maintaining boundaries. The warmth, the friendship, the love, that's gone forever, replaced by a necessary politeness. Seeing her still sometimes triggers a pang of sadness for what we lost, but mostly, I feel detachment. Carol remains largely on the periphery, her influence diminished. Our interactions are minimal and frosty. Aunt Patty became an unexpected ally, often facilitating communication regarding family events involving Lily, ensuring Carol doesn't overstep. Lily is thriving. She's a happy, bright little girl, thankfully too young to remember the initial turmoil. Shielding her from the conflict and ensuring she feels loved and secure by both parents has been my absolute priority. Being a single father is challenging, juggling work and parenting, but the bond one share with my daughter is the anchor of my life. She is the reason I fought for the truth, the reason I rebuilt, the reason I get up every morning. The revenge I enacted, exposing the truth with the email and audio clips, doesn't feel like a triumph in hindsight. It feels like a necessary, painful surgery performed to remove a malignancy. It brought relief and fairness, stopped the gaslighting, and set the record straight, but it didn't erase the pain. True healing came later, through acceptance, forgiveness, mostly for myself, for trusting blindly, and focusing on building a new future. I learned that trust, once obliterated, is nearly impossible to fully restore with the same person. I learned that family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the people who stand by you when things fall apart, like Aunt Patty or the friends who saw through the lies. I learned that a mother's love isn't always unconditional or rational. Sometimes it's fierce and protective to the point of enabling destructive behavior, as Carol demonstrated. Most importantly, I learned about my own strength. I survived something that felt unsurvivable. I faced the ugliest truths, navigated the treacherous waters of divorce and custody, and emerged not unscathed, but whole. I am more cautious now, perhaps less naive, but also more self-aware and determined to build my life on a foundation of honesty and mutual respect. Sharing this story isn't easy. It dredges up painful memories. But if hearing about my lowest point, about crawling out of that wreckage, helps even one person feel less alone in their own struggle, then it's worth it. Betrayal can break you, but it doesn't have to define you. The scars remain, yes, but they are proof of survival, proof that even after the deepest wounds, healing is possible, and a new, perhaps unexpected, life can begin. Looking back, I realize I lost a part of myself, but I also found something stronger. If you've ever been betrayed, know this. You're not alone, and healing is possible. Thank you for listening to my story. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more real stories like this one. Until next time, take care of yourself.